And that is, I mean, that's again, Ukraine is making people rethink a lot of things here, isn't it? Now we know that post-COVID we've got economy bouncing, so as coals are going up again, and everybody's really looking at nuclear. It's not cold yet. I mean, in that world, one's going to have to fight for that. But there's a short-term panic, isn't there? But there is a bigger question of, okay, so we really do have to reset. More people are saying, what is the system we want out of this? And I'm just being blind optimist to believe they're not going to go, yeah, well, we want the coal future, we want the fossil future. They are going to say, we want a new future. Then is that possible? I mean, are you getting financing proposals rapidly to say we need more of that, the wind and solar is by comparison cheaper, we can do it now? What are you seeing in that market?
It's absolutely massive. And the fact that in big chunks of the world now, solar, even before the recent run-up in oil prices, solar was just cheaper. It was cheaper, and cheaper by a lot. Certainly in the whole tropical belt, solar is cheaper by a lot. And now with $120, $130 oil, it's much, much, much cheaper. Wind, a little bit less so, but also very compelling. But we need, I think this is to Jennifer's point as well around innovation. We can't rely entirely on solar, wind, and hydro. And there are also some biodiversity complications for some of those technologies as well. And we've got to take some of the technologies like direct air capture, where we're sucking carbon out of the air directly or capturing it at source and permanently sequestering that. Well, right now, that's completely uneconomic by 5 or 6 times, and we'd have to reduce the cost by 80% for it to be economic. But we know that technology costs do come down by 80%. Solar came down by 98%. Memory chips could come down by 99.9%. So when you get things scaled, you do get those cost advantages, and then we're in business, if we could say. But it's one thing for us to fund a solar farm, which is economic on its own merits. It doesn't require special tariffs or government subsidies. That's kind of easy. It's very hard to finance something that's fundamentally uneconomic, where you're relying either on philanthropic donations or government support, because those are inclined to be pulled away at inconvenient times if you're a creditor. But it's happening, but not in the scale that we need.
No, and that's a sustainability one. Jennifer, the COP was, I always think, certain events, or it could be a great friend. You aim at this thing and things pile up in front of it. We've got Egypt coming. There'll be other huge issues in the world, obviously Ukraine, not the least of them. But do we feel that, the convening power, do you feel that's still spreading the urge to, because you say this is going to be a team sport, it's not an individual game. Do you feel the energy behind that this year? And what do we see about Egypt coming? How will that affect?
I think it's on us. I think it's on us to make it urgent and show up, and that means the private sector, it means governments. I think it's a wonderful opportunity. I know Egypt is looking to have an Africa focus to this COP because there's huge opportunity in Africa. There's opportunity to leapfrog technologies in Africa. And like you said, that many developing countries are the ones worst affected by this crisis, whether that's desertification or loss of biodiversity, genuine poverty. So how can this sustainable future offer green growth opportunities across many of these countries? So I think there's a lot of momentum, but it's really on us to take the decision to make it important.
Because the report last week was another scary one, wasn't it? Like IPCC. that you did think, oh God, do we sink to our knees? Is it possible? And what they say, 1 billion people by 2050. And these are very close-up perspectives now. Certainly, if you're a younger generation, 2050 is not that far away from another point. How does one keep the sense? How do you keep the sense of optimism, Peter, and that commitment? Because that's going to be a lot of it. When you say it's up to us, there is a leadership game in small businesses, big businesses, at every level and every individual saying. And I think it's a bit of what Bill was talking about. This is doable. Yeah. If we lose the confidence it's doable, we've got a problem. And yet there is an unknown here that we haven't yet nailed.
Yes. So I'd like to say that the answer should all be carrot. But I'm not convinced of that. I think this is a carrot and stick situation where to maintain the optimism and the energy, we need to remind people of the downside here and make that real. and show people that...
And that was in the report, wasn't it? It was that people are being affected and dying now. We can't see it. That was one of the shocking things. Obviously, they're really laying out, this isn't something that's going to happen out there. This is now happening. So we've got to pick that up.
And show pictures of the Indonesian rainforest 30 years ago, 10 years ago, and today. So that people... Because, I mean, that's the power of TV, right? You know, we're talking about Ukraine and part of the reason that these things are so horrendous is we're not just reading about it in a newspaper as you would have done in the weeks after the event in World War One. Yep. It's real time, and we've got used to that. So we have to make this thing tactile to people.
Yes, I think it's very visible and very, very clear. Yeah. And is that the same sort of sense you feel? I mean, what is going to give you the energy you need, Jennifer, sitting where you sit? I mean, how do you, what's going to, because you say you need some leadership in it to actually turn up and do stuff, but underneath that there is also there's a sort of underlying energy here. There's signals you've got to pick up on and bring together in a way. And I mean, what are the rocks that you've got how many months till, I can't remember, Egypt, if that's your next biggest event, but are there things that you want to change in that? Is it the emerging market energy that's out there? Is it?
I think we've built a relatively strong foundation. I think we call it in this SMI, it's a coalition of the willing. If you're willing to step up and lead and be a brazenly bold leader that the world needs right now, this is your club.
Yeah.
And that includes world leaders, like who wants to step up. We want to keep encouraging and having more and more companies and countries join us in this mission, but we want them to have that spirit of energy and innovation and urgency. And sort of part of my job the next few months is just to keep rallying that support, leveraging His Royal Highness's convening power. And just, I think he comes from a place of authenticity and 50 years of working on this agenda. He genuinely cares and believes in what he's doing. And I think that's a great model for all of us.
No, I think very, 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 very powerful.
And it just reminds me as well, because there may be many people online from the Pacific Islands.
Yes. Yeah.
And, I mean, this is real. I mean, this is... so actually seeing the world from their perspective, rather than us sitting in our comfy homes here in London, is very real as well.
And that's already begun to show how you can get genuine change by bringing those things to bear. I think that's got to be right. And I think, Bill, in a way, you made your big commitments and you're just driving it now. And I think, obviously Carbon is that, and GFANS and your own organisation, but also leveraging that into the space. In terms of keeping that energy up this year, I don't think you have much of a... I never worried about you keeping energy and commitment, but you do want to feel it around you too. Yep. Is there anything, what else could help that happen? Because I agree, and on a global basis, this is about cohering people. This is the willing coming together. Are there more things, if you had a magic wand and you could wave it, you would be asking to happen?
Well, it's interesting, to Peter's point, there are carrots and there are sticks. And I think there was a tremendous amount of energy that went into the work that's been done over the past, I'll say 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
We made our first very declarative statements about not financing coal 5 years ago.
Yeah, big deal.
It was a big deal at the time, certainly in the markets where we operate. It's still a big deal, given the way the coal is used. But that crescendoed into a very detailed plan for how we would transition to net zero, but not perfectly detailed. There's more to go. We covered 67% of our emissions. There's 33% left to go, and it's a little bit harder to keep that energy focused on the fine tuning than it is to get the big picture right. But of course, we all know that the devil is always in the detail, and the fine tuning is where I'm going to use every metaphor I can pull. It's where the rubber hits the road. Yeah. And that's the task now. And just in case we get a little bit slovenly ourselves, we've got shareholders and financiers and our own employees that are holding our feet to the fire, and they do carry sticks. Yeah. And
I think the other thing,
that is the big difference. People can now hold you to account in a way that wasn't.
Yeah, but also the things that we're doing now, almost by definition, are the easier things to do. So we set ourselves a target to reduce the carbon intensity of the equity proportion of our funds by 25% over 18 months. We did 38%. I said the equity proportion because actually we don't have the data yet to do the fixed income. Now, we've set ourselves a target of 50% of all asset classes by 2030. So we've got real hard work to do in terms of getting these numbers for all the other asset classes. So that's just my microcosm of the world. All these other industries have got the same things. There are things that are relatively easy to do straight away, and then there's the really heavy lifting.
No, I think that's hugely important.